A pair of bronze figures that look deep in conversation now stand at Fort Canning Park, the site of Singapore's first botanical garden. One is of Stamford Raffles, who landed in Singapore 200 years ago, and the other, Dr. Nathaniel Wallich, a botanist and also a close friend of Raffles, who helped create that first garden. The Scholars in Conversation artwork is the work of British sculptor Mr. Andrew Lacey, who is with us now in studio. And on Zoom, joining us is Mr. Ng Boon Gee. He is Group Director, Fort Canning Park and Istana at NParks. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me here today. Andrew, it's good to see you. And congratulations on the unveiling of the statues at Fort Canning today. So Singaporeans are very familiar with Sir Stamford Raffles. We've got two statues of him, and you may have seen them around the island somewhere. This is the third that we'll have on this island now. Did you have to keep the pose that we traditionally, sort of think of Raffles having, this sort of aura of assurance he has with his folded arms when you were making this piece?
Oh, that's so good. No, had to change that completely.
Yes.
He has to be a human.
Kind.
He has to be with someone that we could recognise and kind of understand. So that had to go, and also that whole thing of the historic trope of, putting a man on top of a column, in that very serious way. I just needed to change.
It's a very different way of doing a sculpture, isn't it? It doesn't have that typical look to it. Let's bring Mr. Ng Boon Gee in here of NParks. Mr. Ng, let's talk about the work, the sort of genesis behind this, because we know that the University of East Anglia, the Singapore chapter, they commissioned this work with donations from the estate of Mr. and Mrs. Tan Chi Kao. Can you tell us about this commissioning and what it's about?
Oh, well, as a Singaporean, we all know that Sir Stamford Raffles has played a very important role in shaping the success of Singapore in the early days. But what we also don't know that actually he is also an avid naturalist. On the other hand, his good friend, actually Dr. Nathaniel Wallich, he is actually a very famous botanist. So the two gentlemen has played a very significant roles in the early days of the Singapore plant world. So we do think that this is very meaningful for us to commission this pair of sculptures in the space where the first botanic garden was created in Fort Canning Park.
Mr. Ng, it's important, isn't it, for Singaporeans to remember the contributions of colonial figures like Nathaniel Wallich and Sir Stamford Raffles, would you say?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm trying to say, yes, because they are very important people who actually helped to shape the plant world of Singapore in the early days. Yeah.
Andrew, back to you. This piece, the theme of it, Scholars in Conversation, these are not just two statues, these are two individuals sort of interacting with each other almost in repose. Tell us more about why you chose that.
Well, I mean, they're two great figures. Raffles is an iconic figure in himself. Wallich is this genius mind. But they were brought together because of their love of botany. And so this conversation over time, their letters, that was the thing that really captured my mind. And
the letters that they wrote to one another.
Yeah.
Because they were close friends.
Really close friends.
Yeah, and they wrote to each other in a sort of very sort of a caring sort of way as well.
Yeah, and that really struck me. So I thought that's one of the narratives that has to be woven into this whole story. To take it further.
Yeah, before data collection, we actually used to write things down, categorize it, collect it, and that's what these two gentlemen were doing. And very few people actually know that Fort Canning was the site of the first botanic gardens and the experimental gardens, and the importance of that as well was about, and you've incorporated some of that into the design work.
Exactly. I mean, the figures, there's this slight pun that there's no body there. There's no body in the actual sculpture itself, because that's missing. There are hands, there's a face that you could recognise, but the bodies are made out of drapes, and then within all the drapes are these orchids and ferns and lotus leaves and everything that speaks of the wonderful, flora that's here.
Yeah, but that is also the skill of what you do as an artist, Andrew, because you deal with metal a lot. Your sculptures tend to be in metals, in bronzes and so on. You're also an archaeometallurgist, right? That's
Ancient
something
metals.
that everyone's going to have to Google that now. But you deal in that because you're into art science, right? Why bronze as a material specifically for these two pieces?
Oh, it's got great longevity. It's a thing that I know so well, but really it's something that's going to sit perfectly in the landscape. When it starts to age, it's going to go darker, green. It would meld into the background. I saw it today when I was looking at Wallach, and there was this wonderful tree behind started to move, and it just made the whole figure as if it was animated. So, in bronze, that just melds together and looks perfect.
Mr. Ng, let's bring you back into the conversation here about what these pieces might represent. We do like going to Fort Canning, especially early in the morning and in the evening. Those people who go there typically are going to see these two new statues there now. How would you want them to enjoy what they're seeing?
Well, personally, I love these two sculptures. And I think it's very fitting for them to be sited where they are right now, which is where the first botanic garden is. And basically, we have also planted a series of plants material in the vicinity of these sculptures. And some of this plant material that we have featured here, for example, we have a Nepenthes rafflesiana, which is named after Sir Stamford Raffles, which is essentially a native featured plants. Another plant material that we have featured is called Schismatoglottis warwickii. Pardon me for the long name. It's actually commonly called a drop-tongue plant. Features named after Dr. Warwick. And we hope that when the visitors come to the Fort Canning to admire these two new sculptures, they also take the time to learn some of this plant material that are being featured here, so that they will know more plant material that we have actually curated for them.
So much has gone into helping visitors appreciate these two beautiful sculptures. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming into the studio. Andrew, good to see you again. Andrew Lacey there, the sculptor, all the way from the UK, of the two statues at Fort Canning Park. And also we've been joined by Mr. Ng Boon Gee from NParks. Thank you.